Welcome to the first ever Housing Happy Hour podcast, where I sit here with a guest and a drink in hand, and we discuss current matters related to real estate. I'm here with Brian Quinlan. Brian, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What do you do?
Well, first of all, James, cheers to you, brother. Thanks for having me on today. Really
Cheers.
appreciate that. I'm Brian. I'm a realtor in the Indianapolis, Indiana area. A little different than where you live. I've been about 3.5 years as a full-time realtor. I generally focus on residential real estate here in the Indianapolis market and surrounding areas. Prior to doing this gig, I was a teacher, which I did for 20 years. Some of the same, but some different. And the different is very different.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not sending clients to detention, huh?
I'm not. And speaking to adults is usually different than speaking to the kids. But you know what? There's still a whole lot of teaching in what I do on a regular basis with clients. That part of it very similar.
Absolutely. And what level did you teach?
Over 20 years, I did 8 years of elementary school at different grade levels. And then my final 12, I was a sixth grade math teacher.
That's awesome. Yeah, when we talk about marketing and different things as real estate agents, what do they tell us to write at, right? Like a fourth or fifth grade level.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's pretty easy to do because, as I often said in my final years of teaching, that the sixth graders are my people. I speak to that level and it's good.
Right. Yeah, so that actually might end up being a pretty good segue to what we're talking about today. This commissions lawsuit that's going on out of Missouri is
Yeah.
is interesting, and it's a kind of a complex topic. It's a little bit, I think the outcome is pretty easy to understand, but the reasons why it's being at issue are a little bit complicated. There's matters of public trust, there's matters of antitrust lawsuits, and some different practices that are or had been up to yesterday commonplace in the real estate market that are going to be changing. I don't know, what's your first initial takeaways of this? Maybe give us a little synopsis of how you see things.
Sure. So, a couple things. Number one, I can't fathom how this lawsuit ever actually came to be. And number two, yes, I can foresee changes coming to real estate, but the question is how quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Because for those who don't know, the gist of the lawsuit had to do with just the state of Missouri, National Association of Realtors, Keller Williams, Berkshire Hathaway, Anywhere, which includes Century 21, and Remax were originally named in this lawsuit, claiming that, though I never saw the words antitrust, that's where they were saying was that these agencies were colluding to set the price or set the percentage of commissions for agents when they sold houses for people. And a part of it also had to do with those who sold their houses believed that maybe they were getting screwed by having to give up a part of the money they were giving up in commission was going to the buyer's agent on the other side. And whether they didn't understand that, they didn't know that was the case. That's where I go to. I don't understand how this even came to be because here in Indiana, our listing agreement very specifically says here's the percentage that I am charging you as a listing agent to sell your house. And the very next line says, and this is the percentage that is going to go to the buyer's agent. But like that's a binding contract that the home seller is signing. Like, and they have to be of a legal age to sign a contract. And so I actually talked to a friend of mine who's a real estate agent in Missouri because I was like, maybe it's different in Missouri because not all contracts are the same state to state.
Right.
And he said, no, ours says exactly that as well. So that to me, right off the bat, is like, how did this ever even become a lawsuit? Because you all had to sign a contract to sell your house. How can you now come back and claim, oh, I didn't know?
And I think too, because California is very much similar, right? And in fact, ours, you also tell me in California, what I would do is say, put a number at the top as the total commission the seller pays. And then from that commission, I'm going to pay a percentage of that to the buyer's side. Is that the same in Indiana?
Yep, exactly how it is.
Yeah. So it's, and often I get questions from sellers, actually. This happens a lot, is where they'll say, all right, I'm paying you like I'm not quoting interest rates or anything like that, but or commission rates.
Yeah.
I'll get a hypothetical, say 6% listing, and then they'll see 3% or 2.5 or 2 or whatever to the buyer's agent side. And they'll say, hang on, is it 8 or is it 6? I have to clarify for them, this is what you pay me. And out of what you pay me, I pay to the co-op broker. And I'll be honest with you, it is a rule in our MLS, even today, as I'm sitting here, it's a current rule in our MLS here in California that we actually have to offer a compensation. I'm sure that's changing like tomorrow, but that's a rule. So if we violate that rule, we will see a fine for that. The thing that I always take away is I don't care if my trade organization says to do something. I do what the client tells me to do, and I do what's legal, right? So if I have to take a fine in order to serve my client's best interest, I'm going to do that. And I think a lot of agents don't think through this stuff that at that level, and they just go can't. I can't is not a word that I know. I've been an entrepreneur for too long. I can't. Even when my kids say I can't, I always correct them. I've got daughters 2 and 3, and I always correct them. I say, no, we don't say I can't in this house. We say I don't know how. So that gives me an opportunity to teach them, and it puts them in the mindset to learn this, right? I can't is not a word that I know. So if somebody says to me, I don't want to offer a commission, even before all this, I would say, okay, let's talk about what that means to the desirability of your listing. Let's talk about what that means in the current real estate marketplace. But this whole idea that like either you don't want to and that's not allowed, or you have to, which I think is way more nefarious, right? You have to offer a commission. No, they don't. And if you say that they do and you're a real estate agent and you're listening to this, you've been wrong for a long time. Don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
Right.
part of what you're saying goes back to the I don't know how this lawsuit ever came to be because the commission is negotiable.
Right.
And the seller has the right to say, no, I don't want to give up that percentage to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, that is one, as there are many parts on our listing agreement that has a blank line. So it's not set.
Right.
That is something that can be changed. And I know that you, with your current brokerage, you and I used to, I don't anymore work for the same brokerage. And the entire time that I worked for that brokerage, never once did anyone tell me,
Right.
hey, you have to put this percentage on all of your purchase agreements or sorry, your listing agreements. It wasn't required. And how that all got mixed into a lawsuit where someone is saying that they're colluding to set commissions, not our group.
Right.
It's again, I don't quite understand it.
Yeah. And then you talk about the time that the jury took to deliberate. This is a complex topic.
Yeah.
And I've got years of experience. You have years of experience. It's something that we've learned. We've been trained on it. So you have to do your state Department of Real Estate training, which in a roundabout way teaches relevant things that are true to that are important for you to know in the course of selling real estate. But anybody you talk to will tell you that like what you learn from the Department of Real Estate trainings that you do at your state level have very little correlation to what you do in the actual practice of selling real estate. But so you learn it in your licensure stuff. Then you go into your offices and they train you about how commissions are operating and how the contracts operate and how these different things. And then you get into the practice of real estate. You learn then what the kind of the MO of your marketplace is. And everybody's different, right?
Yep.
So in our market, we have this standard of practice. Is that the legal requirement for the sale? Absolutely not. And anybody that applies that is not correct. I think the thing that I take away from this is that you've got a jury of 12 people in Missouri that looked at this and in 2.5 hours decided on a $5 billion payout, right? So this one, the current judgment, which will be appealed, it will be smaller, but it is for 1.75, 1.78, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They're going to treble that. And that at the federal level, when you have these big lawsuits, anything I said at the top of the call, anything that violates the public trust, when you have that, there's a legal process. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not wanting to get neck deep into all this. But what they'll do is they'll call it treble damages, and they'll actually triple that. They're intentionally making the damages very damaging. So I don't like the implication that the industry as a whole, obviously I don't. I'm an upstanding realtor. I'm bound by the Realtor Code of Ethics to have fair and honest dealings, among several other things. And it sucks to think that there might have been some people among us that were acting not within those standards. Obviously, I don't like the optics of this, but what they'll do is they'll treble the damages up to actually over $5 billion if it stays like it is. But the different brokerages are going to appeal this. They've already started their appeal process, and the attorneys are going to be taking this nationwide.
You say that. So at the beginning, I said which companies were involved.
Mhm.
Remax and Anywhere, which again includes Century 21, they actually settled out of court before it even started.
Turned out to be a
Uh,
really smart move to do that.
settled for 55 million. Anywhere settled for 83 million. And so then they're not part of the $1.78 billion settlement.
Mhm.
The same day that verdict came out, another lawsuit was filed against National Association of Realtors and other large companies like Redfin, EXP, others that I right now can't think of. And this one is a national lawsuit. It's not just in one state. And there's billions and billions of dollars on the line in those particular as well. Like I said, what are the ramifications going to be for this? We may not know for quite a while. We
Mhm.
were on a call today, you and I, in a different one, where somebody said that this is very likely going to wind up going to the Supreme Court. Yeah, I could totally see that happening just because it's going to get, we already know there's going to be an appeal. If that works out, then somebody else will, it'll just keep going.
Yeah. So I think for agents, this is going to change over time. And I don't think this is going to be an overnight thing. I don't even think this is necessarily going to be a 2024 thing. But over time, this is going to change how buyers are represented in this country. And I think I obviously the money is the factor, but I don't think that's the main factor. I think it has to do with buyer representation and safety. And I'm in California. We're one of the most litigious states in the union, right? So everybody sues everybody over everything. So I think you're going to see a situation where you're going to have buyers that are choosing by their own willingness to be unrepresented. They're going to get into deals and have problems because deals have problems, and our job is to fix them. I don't
Yeah.
sell real estate. I talk about this all the time. I don't sell real estate. I sell a service, and that service is helping you process a real estate transaction and negotiate that transaction in a way that benefits you and is also acceptable to the counterpart, right, to the other party. That's the elevator pitch of what any good realtor does.
It's a quick elevator ride.
Yeah, and I like to move fast. I don't like to, it's not like I'm out there selling cars or selling widgets or selling baskets. Like I sell real estate, but what I'm really doing is I'm selling my experience. I'm selling my ability to help you get through this smoothly and without legal issues and in a way that serves you and your family. So when you think about it like that, you take the buyer's agent who should think like that and take them completely out of the picture, right? So a buyer goes in unrepresented. Now you've got the seller and the seller's agent representing the whole transaction effectively, right? Even if the buyer's technically, so you can have a buyer that goes in and gets represented by the seller's agent, by the listing agent, or you
Mm-hmm.
can have a buyer that is not represented. I don't like doing deals where buyers are not represented because it just feels like they're going to get themselves into trouble. And I want to help and I want to advise. And I'm actually not able to do that when they're unrepresented. So it's a little bit funky, but I've done them before. They're not fun because you just mop the floor with the buyer because I'm representing the seller. I'm not trying to do that. It's just how it plays out.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you want to be really careful about how that all plays out. And I think what I'm trying to say here is like when all of this happens and when the first batch of buyers start getting in a bad situation or they feel like they've been taken advantage of, or in some cases they may have actually been taken advantage of, and they start to bring lawsuits and they start to bring issues because of those interactions, I think you're going to start to find out that the perception of the real estate agent is naturally going to change for the better. People today think that real estate agents are Mr. Moneybags and we're all walking around. What's the guy on the old Looney Tunes or old Disney cartoons, the really rich duck?
Oh, Scrooge. Scrooge
No,
McDuck.
yeah, Scrooge McDuck, right. I think everybody thinks that a lot of real estate agents are like that. I don't know. I'm not like that.
I'm
I got
not.
I
I
got
do not have a room full of gold coins that I dive into.
That's right. I got 2.5 kids and the white picket fence, just like the rest of us. And I'm just trying to make sure the bills are paid at the end of the month. And it's one of those things where it's a perception versus reality thing. Okay. you know what? Big lawsuit, things are going to change because they want them changed. And I understand the desire, although I think the execution's pretty screwed up here. I think it's going to be not so good. In 2, 3, 4 years, the agents who are still remaining, which is going to be me, and I'm sure you, but I don't know how many others, will have a different landscape. I think we'll come out on the other side of this, looking at this going, wow, I think hopefully the buyers recognize that we're valuable. The buyers recognize that we're necessary, and we'll figure out how to get paid on that some other time, right? That decision just gets kicked down the road.
Thinking about what you're saying, I have a transaction going on right now that if I think about, because I'm representing the buyer, if I think about what a pain in the rump it would have been for them to have to deal with all that we've had to deal with in this transaction, they would have driven themselves crazy. So that in terms of what we do, we're there to represent our clients because like you said, we don't own any of this stuff that we are selling because we're
Right.
not selling anything. We're representing and providing a service. But going back and forth, James, we literally did 5 counter offers on this house. And each time I talked to my client about this, they got more and more aggravated just because the seller wasn't really being very negotiable. It was like baby steps each time going back and forth instead of taking one big step and, okay, let's just agree to do this. And to think about if they would have had to deal with that on their own, this deal might not even be happening because they probably would have just been pissed off enough to say, you know what, I'm just going to go somewhere else. And that's where our value comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, so many people, I think, in the general public look at a real estate agent, like you said, as someone who makes a lot of money, which most of us do not, and someone who opens up a door for you so you can get inside and take a tour, and like that's your job. And that certainly isn't the case, where they're acting on behalf of our buyers and sellers, but on behalf of our buyers to help them get the best deal that they can through negotiation because we practice that on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Most people buy a house and it's several years before they go buy another house, or in the case of first time home buyers, never done it before and have no idea.
I have no
And
idea.
signing a contract to buy a house is vastly different than signing a lease to live somewhere. That's the service that we provide, is representing those people to try and get them the best deal that they can get on whichever side that's going to be. When I think about what does this lawsuit potentially mean for the future, I think that there are a few possible ramifications. For the buyers, potentially this is going to make it even harder for them to be able to get under contract for a house. Because number one, they're not going to have somebody giving them advice on how to negotiate correctly. Number two, and granted, who knows when all this may or may not change, but let's assume it's going to change. Right now, as it is in most cases, the seller is the one who pays the commission to the buyer's agent. Technically, it goes to the listing agent, splits it up between them and the buyer's agent. So that's how we as buyer's agents get paid, because it helps the buyer. It's money that they don't have to bring to the table at closing. They already have so many costs associated with closing.
Yeah.
They have the down payment, assuming they're getting a loan. They have the down payment that they need for the loan type that they have. There's closing costs that are involved with closing a transaction. Up front, there's probably going to be an inspection that they have to pay for, as well as if they're getting a loan, there's going to be an appraisal fee that they have to pay, and the earnest money from the very beginning. And to think that now they may have to come up with a commission to pay their agent, it just makes it harder. And in the present situation, now who knows what will be down the line, but in the present situation where interest rates are around 8%,
Mm-hmm.
and the price of homes continues to go up and up, asking them to bring even more money to the table when right now so many of them don't qualify because they don't have the money to bring to the table,
Right.
it just makes it immensely harder for them. So if that ultimately is the result of this particular lawsuit, we're going to have fewer buyers in the market, that's for sure.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting to me, because so that last line, let me key into that a little bit. Fewer buyers in the market. That fact in and of itself might actually be good, right? Because that may cause the market to fall which would in theory, make homes more affordable for buyers, right? The reason, and this is, I get lost in this because we talk about the Fed and buyers are so irritated with the Fed. The Fed is raising rates to help the economy. Now that's confusing because you're like, how is making things more expensive helping the economy? It's driving down prices, right? Why is it driving down prices? Because affordability is higher. Why does that work, right? Because there's fewer buyers for your stuff. So sorry if that sounds too base level, but I get that question
It's okay.
all the time. The same is true in real estate. As we make things harder for buyers, that makes things potentially better for buyers in the long term. So if you make it harder in the short term, it makes it better in the long term because of the market conditions we're in. However, the way that we're choosing to do this has nothing to do with economics. It may be the outcome, but it has nothing to do with economics. It has everything to do with, I'm trying to find a better word than safety for the buyers, right? It's
protection.
Yeah, and it's not the realtors. This is where I hope that our message doesn't get confused. It's not the realtors that are making it unsafe. It's the sellers are going to ask for whatever they can get, and the buyers are going to ask for whatever they can get. Have you ever tried to negotiate with somebody over a parking spot? That's the closest thing that I can come to is like two people sitting behind the wheel of their car fighting over the same parking spot. I think without the realtor standing in the middle, I think that's how most real estate transactions end up.
A standoff.
Yeah, and there's just this knee-jerk frustration. There's this, even if it doesn't need to be there, even if it's not important that you be frustrated, there's this like knee-jerk frustration. There's this knee-jerk belief that things have to go my way and this guy's out to get me. And I can't tell you how many times as a real estate agent, like how is your business structured? I'm like a true 50-50. I do about 50% sellers, 50% buyers. You about the same?
I skew a little bit more towards buyers than sellers.
Okay, interesting. So I skew slightly more to sellers. So it's perfect. It's a great conversation. A lot of times I'm talking the seller because the sellers will say things like, I've already negotiated down, or I've already come off of my target price, or I've already this, or I had 15 other offers, and why am I going to screw around with this guy? So the sellers will say stuff like that to me. In a down market, they'll say the first thing, and in an up market, they'll say the second thing. In every single transaction, it is my job to set the expectation for the seller of, listen, we're going to work this out. There's going to be a request for repairs. There's going to be a round of negotiations at the beginning, in the middle, to work all this stuff out. And then we're going to close and everybody's going to shake hands and love on each other. And it's going to be this really great transaction. If you take us out of how many times have you been in a deal where the buyer's agent, let's say your listing side, how many times have you been in a deal with a buyer's agent, just a complete pain in the ass, and you insulate your seller from that so that they can feel good about the transaction? And the thing that I love is when I know that I've done this well, is when the seller comes to me and says, thank you so much for a smooth transaction that was not at all smooth. That's when I've done my job. You take us out of that role, it's going to be bumpier.
Yep.
Is that better for the client? I don't think so. Because if I've got a content seller that doesn't know that I'm getting midnight phone calls from the listing or from the buyer's agent over nothing, or that doesn't know that the buyer is slow to get their stuff in or get their stuff back to me, or their pacing's not what I want. If they don't know that, they're more likely to be amiable to a reasonable request for repairs, to a reasonable negotiation. So it's just one of those things where I really think that buyers will pay more than they should. They'll negotiate less than they should. When the negotiation does get challenging, instead of working through it, they'll just bail. So you have more fallout. So you have more frustrated buyers and sellers. And the real estate transaction that in this country to date, I think generally is this really beautiful thing. It's this transition from our family to the next, or for lifestyle, or for kids to get in a certain school, or kids to have a certain life that we promise them. All the things that realtors are really good at, like evoking the emotional part of it, is going to become this really dirty, sleazy, crappy, scuzzy, like, not to pick on any one industry, but it's going to be like buying a car at a used car lot. And I just don't think that with the most important real estate transaction of somebody's life, that's how we should be doing things. Now I'm in California. $1 million transactions out here are not necessarily the most important real estate transaction or financial transaction that one of my clients might be making that week. But I think in most of the country, that's going to be how this is.
Yes, that it's pretty much that way here. Right? Yeah. So aside from the ramifications of what this could have for buyers, I can foresee how it could change for realtors. One possibility, because you and I talked about this on the phone yesterday. One of the things that I've never actually understood, and this was even before I got into real estate, was why the heck does the payment for the buyer's agent come from the seller of the house? Like, it's their house, and the buyer's agent works for the buyer, not for the person who's selling the house. So why does that money go over there? The more I've gotten into this, the more I understand why that is the case, because it's a benefit to the seller of the house to have somebody coming in as representation for the buyer, right? What I could foresee happening is the possibility that buyer's agents maybe have to start working on either A, they're going to get paid by the buyer, and if it's going to be a similar percentage, that's a large amount of money. And I've already talked about how that means more money that the buyer's going to have at the beginning, or to make it potentially less heavy on the buyer. Perhaps we start going to a model where the buyer's agent gets like a flat fee. Maybe it's, and I'm just going to make up numbers, right? Maybe it's $500, maybe it's $1,000 or something like that. And that's your fee for working for your buyer and getting them into a contract. And the list agent, they work for a commission because that the price of that house can go up or down, a negotiation thing, right? So I could see that sticking as a percentage. But instead of, and this is using your previous example because it's not standard, if instead of charging the seller 6% to sell that house and then giving up percentage to the buyer's agent, now the buyer's agent has their flat fee they're getting from their client. So the list agent can list that house for only maybe 2 or 3%. Thus, the seller pockets more money, which is the point of the lawsuit. And overall, it can just, that just changes so much of what we've always done in real estate. Before you and I ever got it, this is how it's been for the history of real estate. That's a scenario that I could potentially see happening. What happens if that's the case? A lot of real estate agents, I'm out, man.
Yeah.
Working my butt off for potentially 1 or 2 days, right? Or potentially 1 or 2 months. And in the end, you're getting $500 or $1,000 for all the hours you put into it, all the miles on your car, all of that. That can get to be a lot. And as buyer's agents, they may find that it's not worth it. Obviously, if you can get a lot of houses, though you and I both know working for a lot of buyers at one time is hard to do. It involves a lot of driving, it involves a lot of time on calls, it involves a lot of personal time, and that can be really challenging. So to think that a buyer's agent could be helping out 7, 8, 10, 12 buyers at one time, that would be really, I'm not going to say impossible, but extremely hard to do.
Right.
And looking at what your payout is for the amount of time that you're putting into that job, man, I might as well go work at Amazon. That could change real estate just based on ramifications from this.
And I think too, like from the seller's perspective of that same situation, right? So the seller, for better or worse, current sellers. So okay, let me get into like how you assess the value of a home for anybody that hasn't sold a home in the last 100 years. You look backwards at comparable sales. So you look backwards and you say, what has sold that is similar in size, condition, location to your home? You take those together and you say, all right, based on the aggregate of all of this information, based on the condition of your home, this is what we believe that your house is worth to the market, right? Now, that's a very subjective number, has to do with market conditions, has to do with condition, has to do with all of the elements of your brick and mortar house, also the market, also the agent and their marketing and their ability to present your house and your listing. All of those things come together to create the value house. What happens though is that is based on this long-standing premise of the listing agent and the buyer getting paid by the seller. So let's say you just cut that in half. Let's say you pay the listing agent 2.5%, 3%. The buyer's agent gets paid zero, and they get compensated through an agreement with the buyer. Totally fine. The listing, the seller, the actual Joe Smith that lives at 123 Main Street is now making 3% more. So at $1 million, and pretty average price point in Orange County, that's $30,000 more that he's putting literally in his pocket. A lot of times that's even tax-free, right? So that's a big benefit to the seller. But the sales price, right? That's the internal, that's the back end, that's the part that nobody necessarily sees. The agent knows what that number is, and the seller knows what that number is, and that's basically it. The front end, though, is the list price, which hasn't changed. So the seller is now actually advantaged to the tune of, say, in my example of $1 million transaction, they're advantaged by $30,000 with no change in the market, right? But the buyer is damaged by that amount because they're paying it out of their pocket, that which the seller, based on the previous listings, and this is only going to be true in the transition, but right now, based on the previous comps, have had to pay. So the buyer is paying 7-8% interest rates. The buyer is paying its realtor for their commission, and the buyer is paying additional 2 to 3% on the sales price of the home, which, by the way, that's what taxes are based on. That's what your property taxes are based on. That's what the transfer taxes are based on. That's what all your fees are based on, are that 2 or 3%. So this is really bad. And they're doing it without proper representation of a good buyer's agent that's getting paid a livable amount. This lawsuit, the net result of this lawsuit, and this is, I think, what we've been saying all along in 17 different ways. We just keep splitting open this onion and coming back to the same conclusion. This is just bad for the buyer in so many different ways.
Yep.
The sellers are making out like bandits. The agents are a little bit in the middle. I don't think we're going to be that impacted. If you're a heavy buyer side, you're going to be very impacted, and that sucks, and I'm sorry for you. But I think that it just isn't good for the buyers. I just don't see how anybody looks at this and says, this is good for the consumer. It's good for the seller. Get that. I don't see how you say this is good for the buyer. So in the current market conditions where buyers outnumber sellers by 5 to 1, there's a couple things. Buyers are the reason that prices are flying up, even in the face of 8% interest rates, because there's so many buyers. There's a lack of inventory, a lack of sellers. It's creating buyers in the marketplace. So limiting the buyers may slow down that approach, but that's going to be what happens. So I just am a little bit worried about this idea that making it harder for buyers is somehow better for the market. In the environment where things are flipped and there's more sellers, I think it's going to be catastrophic. Right now, the market's going to be able to absorb that. And it'll be true for a long time, because I read somewhere that 87% of California homeowners have an interest rate below 5%.
Yeah.
So why in the world, and nationally, it was, I think, 65% nationally have an interest rate below 5%. So why is a seller going to sell in a high interest rate market? So I think we're going to be in this buyers outnumbering sellers situation for a very long time, several years at least. If we get to a market, which we will eventually get to a market where sellers outnumber buyers, and then buyers are also not represented, and buyers agents, you can't get reliable compensation, because look at this. If I'm a buyer's agent and I pulled up the NAR member survey for 2022, median gross income, this is directly off of NAR. I'll put the link in the show notes. Median gross income of realtors, meaning income earned from real estate activities, in 2022 was $56,400. It was an increase from $54,000 in 2021. So they only went up $2,000 in 2022 as the median. Now, that's the midpoint, right? That's not necessarily the average. I can tell you with great confidence that average is going to be under $20,000. Those entry-level realtors are all really buyer heavy. They're getting paid 2.5%, maybe 1.5% commissions. If you drop them down to $500 or $1,500, like you were suggesting, I don't know of anybody that can live on $20,000. The other stat that I'll give you, and again, this is right off of NAR research, The typical realtor is a 60-year-old white female who attended some college and is a homeowner. So what else can I glean from that information? Probably second or third career, probably married, right? Those aren't stats that we have in the member survey. But so does their income matter to the household? It's probably beer money. It's probably go out to the river money, right?
Yeah.
Take that away. And why do they do it? So then now that's where I think, and this is an interesting segue to this, that's where I think Zillow's and some of these online platforms and some of these AI driven platforms and technology systems will start to take over. And is that better for the buyer? I think absolutely not, because the buyers are very reasonably, this is not a dig, buyers are emotional because this is their home base. This is their planet. Like, as much as I sell real estate and as much as my family moves and we do things, I am a homebody. My home is my sanctuary. My office, I'm sitting in my office right now. My office is my sanctuary. Like, this is where I go to hide because I'm not really an extrovert. I want to hide in here, get back to myself, get back to doing what I need to do to communicate with people, and then go and be the realtor I need to be to the world. I am very emotional about where I live. It's also why I don't really like representing myself as a buyer. And I don't represent myself ever as a seller, right? I let somebody else do that because I'm going to make stupid decisions. So I just am, and I'm an industry professional. I got 16 years of experience. I've got a lot of stuff under my belt. I know this because I do this all day. How much more or how much less is a buyer going to know this about themselves, right? And the thing that scares me is the buyers who know that the least about themselves are usually the ones that need the representation the most.
Yeah.
I'm not making any friends today.
Hey, for reference, going back to a point you made about real estate in California.
Yeah.
So I looked up homes for sale here in Indianapolis right now.
Yeah.
You said low end 600,000,
Yeah.
and that's a condo, right?
Yeah.
If you want to live in Indy, you could buy a 5-bedroom, 3.5-bath house with 3,100 square feet on nearly 2 acres for 600,000.
Okay, but what's your coldest daytime temperature that you
Oh,
get?
bro, it can get below zero here.
Yeah, no thanks.
I
Why'd you even suggest that?
asked
Overnight
myself the
lows.
same thing.
I'll look up the averages, but our overnight lows in California, I would be willing to bet that the average overnight low is probably in like January, February. It's probably 50.
Bro, I woke up this morning to 20 something.
Why?
It's 52 right now, and it's midday.
Yeah. So outside of it, here at my office, I'm in Southern California. It's 80 degrees outside. Can you see that?
Yep. Our low tomorrow will be 37. So there's that.
Yeah. Our low is next Wednesday. It'll be 50.
Yeah. And it's funny. I grew up in Illinois and
Yeah.
moved to Indiana when I went to college. So this is like the only weather I've ever known.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it's actually warmer here than it is where I grew up just because of
Really?
latitude. But I hate the cold. I am like every winter, I'm like, why do I live here? I go outside and my face hurts.
Why? How much better this podcast would be if you were a person?
That's true.
Come on, buddy.
That will not happen. I've actually, my parents, they built a house in Florida 6 years ago in this fantastic over 55 community. And it's like a resort because they have a clubhouse, there's activities, it's a phenomenal place, 3-bedroom ranch house. I said, all right, when you guys are done with this house, I'm just going to take over, just so you know.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm still 5 years away from qualifying to actually live there, and they're nowhere near being done with the house anyway, so it's not a big deal. But
Right.
yeah, I'm not moving west. I'm going southeast.
And I get it too. California's had a net negative immigration for net negative legal immigration since 2020, right? I think it's 2019 where it started to fall off. And then with the pandemic and some of the heavy crackdowns, a lot of people were just like, we're out.
Yep.
I get it. Believe me. We were almost one of them. We decided as a family to stay mainly because it was easier for me to support the family here than it was to go somewhere else. But it was also my wife also is a Huntington Beach girl, right? She grew up local here and doesn't want to leave the coastal communities and the different things. I will tell you this. I tell people all the time when they leave, if you leave California, be very careful because most people cannot afford to ever come back. And that's, I don't know if that's necessarily a compliment or dig, or I don't know. But we have right now, gas peaked to $7 a gallon. It's not there now. It's about $5 a gallon now. I saw it as high as $5.40 yesterday, but it's about $5 a gallon for gas. It's right now it is average house payment. I'm just spitballing this, but it's somewhere in the $5,500 range for a new buyer at entry level.
Gas here, $3.35.
Yeah. I paid $5 yesterday at Costco, which is the cheapest in town.
Yeah, that's our Sam's Club's probably more $2.90.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yep.
So I really appreciate you being on. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to share about this commission lawsuit or anything else?
Let me see. No. Here, okay. Yeah, it's very minor. The majority of people right now have no idea what are. My dad is a retired CPA, stays up to date on the news and financial world, big businesses, things like that. And when I called him up yesterday, I was like, "Hey, did you see what happened with the lawsuit against NAR and Keller Williams, whatever?" He goes, "I don't know what you're talking about." So I always consider him to be somebody that kind of stays on the pulse of what's going on in the world of business and whatnot. And he had no idea what I was even talking about.
Wow.
And most people, when they see a headline that says real estate, unless they're talking about real estate, unless they're thinking about buying or selling a house, it really doesn't even register with them. That's something they just scroll right on past. That's why A, they're appealing this lawsuit, but B, it's going to be who knows how long before all these things are actually settled. If and when is that actually going to have some sort of an effect on real estate as a business? One thing I think about though is as this becomes more of a commonplace conversation,
Mm-hmm.
I think this is going to be one of those situations that is going to go to the wording of this is the way it's always been done.
Yeah.
So that's why we do what we do. That's just not the case anymore.
Right.
So many parts of our society are like, why is this okay? Why has it been okay for so long? We're not going to be okay with this anymore.
Right.
And so that's where I think even before the lawsuits are officially settled, I think that it's going to start having changes on our business. And that may be driven by the consumers. If you think about a seller who sits down and says, why am I giving up a percentage to the other side? That seems ridiculous. And it's
Right.
because they heard about that somewhere. Oh, yeah. Why would I do that? Yeah, that's who knows how quickly that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But that's what I think is going to drive the change more so than the lawsuit.
And like you mentioned, in 2023, that's not acceptable anymore. So I think we're getting Uberized or DoorDashed, right? And in some cases, maybe that's like right now, that's not better. Uber's gotten very expensive, and so is DoorDash.
Yep.
But they started out nobly. And then I think what happened is people realized like, oh, this isn't sustainable. Like in the case of Uber, it wasn't sustainable. The drivers couldn't afford to stay on the road. And so it looked good. And then Uber, like in California and in many other states, Uber got slapped with labor law issues. And I'm not trying to stick my head into that whole debate. But so they had to raise their prices to make sure that their drivers were getting compensated well enough.
Yeah.
And maintaining safety. Like how ridiculous is that? But they had to maintain safety of their riders. I don't mean to say it's ridiculous. I say it's sucks that had to be something that had to be done, right? And the same with DoorDash, right? DoorDash just the other day, just I think 2 days ago, said that if you don't tip your drivers, be prepared to wait. That was DoorDash saying that, not some guy editorializing it. And you get it because you're like, these guys got to make a wage. I think those kinds of conversations are going to come into real estate now. And is that good for the consumer? Is it not good for the consumer? I think in the short term, it will look good for the consumer. I think in the long term, the loss of customer service, right? Like at the top of the call, I mentioned, I don't sell real estate, I sell a service. The loss of that service and the practice, because I can't offer the service that I offer at scale to thousands of people or hundreds of people or what. I don't want to overstate my customer list.
Yeah.
But to dozens of people, hundreds of people a year for $500 a person. Not because I'm greedy, because I can't sustain it. because
Yeah.
to do it at big enough scale, I have to hire staff. And in order to hire staff, I have to pay them a living wage. If I can't charge a living wage and still attract clients, what am I to do? I can tell you what I'm to do, right? I got to put food on my family's table. And
You're
so
going to go work at Disney.
I've either got to find a different job, which would be tragic for the local industry, or I have to offer less and be less upfront with my clients, which I will not do. I won't do that. I'm not going to sacrifice that. So then if I can't sacrifice that, okay, fine. You won't sacrifice your level of service because I won't. Then I have to sacrifice my customer list. I can't work with as many people. Then it circles. It's a vicious cycle. Now, since you can't work with as many people, you're only getting paid $500 a transaction. You're only earning $500 a month. I don't know about you, but I can't pay my bills on $500 a month. That's why I'm paying. Yeah, that's why I'm paying gas. So I hope that this all works out. I hope that the Uberization of the real estate market ends up being better than I could have dreamed, but I think that it won't. And I think that ultimately less regulation hopefully will actually be better for the market, but it's going to take some time to find our way to that. All right, Brian. Hey, thanks for being on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for helping us kick off the inaugural episode of Housing Happy Hour. What are you drinking? I forgot to ask.
Oh, this is Coors Light.
Ah, there you go. I'm a Coors Light boy too.
This is the beer flavored water, as I like to call it.
That's right. That's
And
right.
I'm okay with that. I like
That's
it.
right.
Cheers to you, buddy.
Cheers.